Okay, thank you. Um, what I was going to say is I think Nancy and Chuck Stanton are I think they're on vacation so they're not with us today. We'll see if Gamliel joins us. We'll see if the Radens join us. But anyway, we are on. We are going to finish the chapter today. We are on the very bottom of 24b, and we're going to have a number of stories about this saintly figure, Hanina ben Dosa. So here we are. Oh, let me share the page. Okay. So we finished on 24b a story about Hanina ben Dosa, who was, had this amazing ability. When it rained, he would be able to tell God or ask God to please not let it rain on him. And then when he would get home, he'd say, okay, now it can rain again because I'm comfortable and the Jewish people shouldn't suffer from lack of rain. And it always worked out that way. So now we're going to read some more stories about his miracle abilities. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. So these are stories that were told about Hanina ben Dosa. B'chol yom vayom bat kol yotzeit ve'omeret kol ha'olam kulo nizon b'shvil Hanina b'ni. The whole world exists, really, is sustained because of my son Hanina. V'Hanina b'ni dayo b'kav charuvim me'erev Shabbat le'erev Shabbat. Hanina is sustained. He doesn't need more than a kav of a carob to get him through the whole week. That's all he needs for food. He doesn't need a lot. He just is a very simple person. And I think if I remember correctly, I checked out a kav would be like, was it a quart and a half, 1.5 quarts of carob. Not a lot of food to get you through the whole week. But that would satisfy him. That's all he needed. And then hava regila devetu lemechama tanura kol ma'alei de Shabbata v'shadaya aktarta. The Gemara, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. Oh, so this is a new story. But so wait, we'll start with. So this is the first part, the first story about Hanina ben Dosa. It's interesting. It's going to be 7 separate stories or tales about him. The first one, again, interesting to point out that this was told in Hebrew, and now the Gemara starts to tell stories. So usually, the Gemara, the story is now in Aramaic. My understanding is that when the Talmud is in Aramaic, it's like a later layer of storytelling. So the earlier story would have been perhaps about Hanina ben Dosa, who was an early, one of the earlier rabbi generation. And then they probably started to tell stories about him, like as a character. So this first one is about how little food he needed, and that God had a very loving relationship with him, and that because of his saintliness, the world continued to exist. The next story is about his wife, who would heat the oven every Shabbat. He even created a great amount of smoke. Why? Mishum kisufa, because she was embarrassed because they were so poor, they didn't have anything to cook. Havala hach shivavta bishta. She had a nasty neighbor, nosy neighbor, who would wanted to check on them. Right? She says, "I know they have nothing. So where's all that smoke coming from their stove?" And she went and knocked on the door to find out what was in the oven. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa was embarrassed, and she ascended va'ayla le'indrona, to the inner room. She didn't want to deal with it. But even though nobody asked, a miracle occurred from heaven just to protect them. It avidla nisa, a miracle occurred. And when the woman came over and looked into the house, she saw the oven filled with bread, and the kneading basin was filled with dough. she said to Rabbi Chanin, his wife, calling her, now this is Planita. This is interesting. So we don't know the name of Rabbi Chanina's wife. Obviously, that tradition never developed. So she called so-and-so, Aiti Masa de Kaharich Lechamich, because you've got your bread is burning. You got to get I'm guessing, it's like a pizza. If you've seen in some of these pizza ovens, like a flat thing to get the bread out. So she said, you got to get your bread out. It's burning. And she said, Amra la, by the way, that's why I went into the house. That's why you didn't see me in the kitchen, because I was going into that inner room to get the bread shovel. So the obvious question is there, wait a minute. First, we were told she was embarrassed, and she ran away. She didn't want to be publicly embarrassed. And then all of a sudden she comes out with a bread shovel. And the conclusion of the story is, Af hi lahavi marda nichnasa mipnei shemilumedet benisim. She had entered the inner room to bring a shovel because she's so accustomed to miracles, I guess on behalf of her husband, that she anticipated that one would occur. So maybe these are two versions of the story. Like one, she was embarrassed and ran away, and the other one, she was very confident that a miracle would occur. So she went to get the shovel. She knew the bread would just show up. Okay. Well, here's another story. Again, not happy about being poor. Rabbi Chanina's wife said to him once, until when will we continue to suffer this poverty? Why do we have to be so poor? And he said to her, well, what should we do? She said, well, pray for mercy. So he prayed to God, prayed to heaven, and something like the palm of a hand emerged, and they gave him one leg of a golden table. So that's pretty good. You've got a table that's golden. You've got now this big chunk of gold. You can sell it, and you won't be poor anymore. That's wonderful. But that night, his wife saw in a dream that in the future, in the world to come, all the other righteous people are eating on a table that have 3 legs, right? A 3-legged table is not going to fall down. But she's going to be eating at a table with 2 legs. Uh-oh. Their future reward is lessened. So she told her husband what she dreamed, and he said to her, well, are you content that everyone is going to be eating at a complete table and we're going to have a defective table in the next world? And she said, oh my God, well, what can we do? Pray for mercy that the leg of the golden table should be taken from you. So once again, he prays, and it's so interesting. We've seen a couple of stories like this where the person asks for something, they get their wish, doesn't work out, they have to pray again so that everything goes back to the way it was. Well, in this case, she prayed that the golden leg be returned to the heavens and be stored up for them for the next world. And then, according to Atana, so this is in an earlier text, right? This is Hebrew. Gadol haya nes acharon yoter min harishon. The miracle of the golden table leg being accepted back into heaven was even greater than the original miracle that the golden table leg was brought down. Because the meaning is that there's a tradition that heaven gives, but it doesn't take back. And here the notes told us that in the Jerusalem Talmud, it explains this story, explains the meaning of this teaching. The hand of the receiver is at the bottom, right? We're on earth. The hand of the giver is on top. Man who is in this lowly world can receive a gift from heaven, but under ordinary circumstances, he doesn't give it back. So it's unusual that heaven if heaven's going to go to the trouble to giving us a gift, we don't say, take it back. We don't want it. But in this case, in the case of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, who's very unique and very special, heaven was willing to take it back so they shouldn't suffer in the next world. Okay, so that's another story. So now we have a new story. The Gemara relates one Shabbat evening, Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa saw that his daughter was very sad. Atziva. Amar la biti amai atzivat. Amra le, she said to him, Kli shel chometz nit chalefli bechli shel shemen. I got confused. The lamps that they had in those times, if you've ever seen pictures of them, they look like an Aladdin's lamp, and you put the oil in it, and then the wick is at the little spout. And on Shabbat, you'd have to prepare this before Shabbat. So you'd fill it with oil, you'd have the spout, and that would give you light for all of Shabbat. In fact, that's the original importance of the Shabbat candle lighting, is that the wife getting the house ready for Shabbat would make sure the lamp was lit, because otherwise you wouldn't have, once it got dark, you wouldn't have any light in the home. So that's the importance of, on Shabbat, you want to light that candle, that lamp beforehand. Well, what did she do? She got him confused. She accidentally put the Shabbat lamp, filled it with vinegar, which of course doesn't light, and she lit that lamp with vinegar, so they won't have any light for Shabbat. So, but Rabbi Hanina, again, a guy, he's used to these miracles. So he said, Biti, ma'ich patlach. Why are you so concerned? Mi she'amar l'shemen v'yilokhu yomar l'chometz v'yilok. The one who, that is, talking about God, the one who said to the oil that it should burn, right, the created, at least is my understanding of the story, that God created a world in which oil lights is a fuel for flame. That same divine being, that God will allow this, for this Shabbat, the vinegar will work. And it's Tana, it was taught, Hayad olek v'holech kol yom kulo. The whole night, the whole Shabbat, that vinegar lamp worked. Ad sheheviu mimenu ur lehavdalah, until they brought from it light for Havdalah. So it worked all the way through Havdalah, even though, according to science, according to physics, it's not going to work, but it did. Another miracle story. Okay, then Rabbi ben Dosa, another story about him. Havule Hanach Ize, he had goats. And they said to him, these goats, goats will eat anything. And so your goats are eating up all of his neighbors were saying this. Your goats are eating up all the property in our fields. And he said to them, if they're causing damage, let them be eaten by bears. He was certain that his goats were properly trained. They didn't eat anything but what they were allowed to eat. And so he says, look, if I'm wrong, if they're causing damage, then you know what? May bears come and eat them. However, but if they are not eating your property, let each of the goats this evening bring a bear impaled in its horns. And evening shows up, and the bears, each goat had a bear impaled on its horns. So the notes here tell us that in the land of Israel, there was a rule that you couldn't raise domesticated animals. Which of course, it can't be all domesticated animals. I think it's little. It says small. Small domesticated animals, like goats, which I'm really curious. I didn't look this up. I should have looked up where the halacha is, because people raise goats in the land of Israel. But okay, but there was a concern. There was a sensitivity that goats eat everything. So how could he have done this? But in any case, this story, what's so interesting about this story about the bears being impaled on its horn, on the goat horns, is, this book that I've been working on, this medieval book called Shevet Yehuda. In it, one of the stories in it tells of a Christian advisor to the king, to the Spanish king. It's a made-up story, but the Christian advisor to the king is pointing out how dumb the Talmud is and how foolish Jews are to believe in the Talmud. And the story that he brings in the book is, one of the examples is that, what kind of craziness do they have in the Talmud that bears could be impaled by goats? This is just silliness that's in the Talmud. Now, of course, what's interesting there is that this is a Hebrew book written for Hebrew speakers, Jews. So it's the author behind the putting into the words of a Christian person criticizing the Talmud his own discomfort with the Talmud. And so obviously there were readers, especially in the medieval period, of people who read these stories and knew that they were just crazy stories. We read this and we say, well, people tell all types of stories, and we can talk about whether it's for entertainment or whether it's to teach a lesson. But in the medieval period, the Talmud, like the Torah itself, was understood was taken often literally. So people accepted that Hanina ben Dosa really had goats, and this must have been a miracle that occurred. But already in the late Middle Ages, there are Jewish readers who are saying, this is craziness. And the Gentiles who are looking into the Talmud, they think it's nutty too, and we're embarrassed. So it's an interesting dynamic. As Jews are becoming more connected with the outside world and there's more interaction, some Jews are reading their own text and are being a little embarrassed by some of these miracle stories, which they just cannot believe could have actually happened. Okay, here's another miracle story. Havale Hahishivavta, he had a neighbor who was building a house, but it turns out when they built the house, the ceiling beams were not the right size. They weren't long enough to reach from one wall to the other. She came before Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, and she said to him, I built my house, but the beams aren't long enough. What can you do for me? And he said to her, what is your name? And she said, Iku. Oh, well, Iku, right? He makes a play on words here. Iku, if that is so, may the house beams reach your walls. And in fact, that's what happened. In fact, they did such a good job of just growing by themselves that they actually went through the walls, through the house, the walls of the house themselves, and you could see the beams, a cubit of the beam on each side of the house. And some say that they extended with segments, adding new walls on both ends of the beams. So it's taught and if you didn't believe it, well, we have a Tana, a Braita from a sage known as Polemo, who said he saw this house. I saw that house, and its beams jutted out a cubit on this side and a cubit on that side. And when I said, wow, what kind of a house is this that has these beams coming out? They said, oh, this is the house that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa roofed by means of his prayer. So we have evidence here that of somebody who actually saw that house that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa called to roof by means of prayer. Now we get back to the story about the goats. Wait a minute, if Hanina ben Dosa, we were told there's a contradiction here, right? He was so poor that they didn't have bread in their oven. How did he have goats? Sounds like he was a little better off than we thought. Here's the story. In fact, he wasn't. This shows what a saintly person he was. Anyway, it says, where did he go? Ha ani have. We thought he was poor. Amru Chachamim. Here's the story about him. Ein megadlin behema daka be'eretz Yisrael. One is not allowed to raise these little domesticated animals in Eretz Yisrael, little goats. Amar Rav Pinchas, Maaseh ve'avar adam echad al petach beito v'hiniach sham tarnagolin. One day there was a person, he left off some chickens on the doorstep of Rabbi Chanina. Umatatan ishto shel Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. So the guy, obviously, he didn't leave it there on purpose. Somehow the guy just left them there. Maybe he forgot them, or maybe I don't know what happened. But somehow these chickens were left at the door of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. His wife found them, and they took care of these chickens because, according to Jewish law, if you find something of somebody's that you can you can describe, that you can actually hope to return. If you found a $20 bill on the street, you have to assume the person gave up hope of ever finding them, because every $20 bill looks like every other $20 bill. So you can, in that case, you don't have to worry about returning it. If you found it in a wallet, then you have to make inquiries to try to find out who lost the money in the wallet. Here in this case, these were chickens, so there's a possibility of finding the owner, because not every chicken looks like every other chicken. So he said to his wife, we've got to care for the chickens until we can find the owner. Well, the owner doesn't come back for quite a while. And he said to her, you can't eat the eggs because they don't belong to us. They belong to the guy who owns the chickens. Well, the chickens laid a lot of eggs, and the chickens hatched from the eggs. And as the noise and mess of the chickens were distressing them, they sold them. So in place of the chickens, they made a better investment for the guy, and they got goats. And they held the goats, and they took care of the goats. The guy who lost the chickens, who knows how many months later this is, he's walking by the rabbi's house, and he says, he said to his friend, I once left these chickens in front of this house. Don't know whatever happened to the chickens. Shema Rabbi Chanina, Amarlo. So he asked him, do you have a sign? Is there a way that you can prove to me that those chickens are yours? Because you can't just give them to anybody. But he says, do you have a sign that they were your chickens? The right color, the right type of chicken, whatever. And he says, hey, I can tell you the sign. And he identified them. Natan lo siman v'natal et ha'izim. So he showed him the sign, and then he was like, all right, so where's the chickens? He goes, well, actually, the chickens, this is what happened. Here's the goats. We had so many, so many eggs and so many chickens, and we couldn't take care of them all. So we turned them into a couple of goats. And we gave, and here are the goats that belong to you. So see, Chanina ben Dosa took care of the animals, didn't make use of them himself, and made sure to return it to the guy, even at a major profit for the original owner. And by the way, in case you were wondering, these happened to be the goats that had the bears impaled the bears on their horns. So that's the only reason why he had goats, because he wasn't wealthy enough to own goats, but he had goats. That's how he got the goats, because of he had to take care of the chickens. So that's that resolves the two stories. Of course, it doesn't resolve the question about how do people have goats in the land of Israel if you're not allowed to raise goats, but okay, well, I don't know. That seems to be a contradiction in the story. Okay, well, that was the stories about Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. All these are miracle stories. Now we get to another poor, righteous individual. Rabbi Elazar ben Pidat, Dechika le milta tuva. He was hard pressed for money. He was so hard pressed that he would actually have bloodletting performed on him. Oh no, I'm sorry. He had bloodletting performed on him, but he didn't have anything to eat afterwards. You know, you've had blood taken from you. You should eat something to gain your strength again. He took a clove of garlic, put it in his mouth, and then he became weak, or I guess maybe he fainted from the blood loss and he fell asleep. The sages came to inquire about his welfare. They saw him weeping and laughing, and a ray of light was shining from his forehead. So a very interesting response that he had to his, to being weak. So when he woke up, they said to him, why were you crying and laughing at the same time? And he said to them, so he had this weird dream. The God was sitting with me. And I said to him, Ad matai etste'er b'hai alma, how long will I suffer in this world? And God responded and said, B'ni nichalach de apche la'alma meresha. All right, maybe what I should do, because you're so special, Elazar, I will restart the whole world, because maybe this time when things happen in the world, you will be born at the right time and you'll be wealthier and you won't be poor. That's this idea, I guess, that, our fates are determined by when we're born. And here in this case, if I restart the world, maybe you'll be born at a better time and that'll be good for you. So Elazar ben Padat says, wait a minute. You suggest doing all this, kulei hai ve'efshar, is it only a possibility, right? If it's a certainty that I get born at the good time, then maybe I'll let you restart the world and everything will go over again. But, if you're telling me it's only a possibility, there's no certainty that I'm going to be born at a good time, then I don't know about this. So, Amrile, I said to him, Dechai tefei o dechayena. How many, are the years that I have already lived, are they more dechayi tefei or is dechayena tefei? Are the years past more, or do I have more years to live than I've already lived? Right? I mean, I don't know how old he was at the time, but let's say he was, 40 years old. If he's saying, do I have another 40 years or 50 years to live to 90? Then, maybe that's also possible. I'll take that risk. But if I've only got, 20 years to live, I've already lived most of my life. I don't know if it's worth it to start the whole world over again. So, he's trying to scope this thing out very practically. Are the years that I've already lived more numerous, or are that I will live more numerous? And God tells them, well, dechayita, the years you have lived are more numerous than the ones you're going to live. So Amri Lakamei, Im Kain, if that's so, it's not, I don't want it. I don't want you to destroy the world and start all over again. Lo ba'ena. Okay. So now, because Rabbi Elazar ben Padat is so modest, God said to me, as a reward for saying I don't want, I will give you in the world to come 13 rivers of pure balsam oil, as large as the Euphrates and the Tigris for you to enjoy. So again, just like that earlier story about the golden legs, these are blessings that will occur to you in the world to come. And I said, when Rabbi Elazar ben Padat is like, wait, that's it? Really? I mean, pure balsam oil, it's nice, but that's all I'm going to get? This and no more? He said to me, but if I give you more, what am I supposed to do to your colleagues, right? They'll be jealous. I said to him, And do I request this from a person who does not have enough? Right? What are you talking about? Give everybody 13 rivers of balsam oil. You're omnipotent. He playfully snapped his finger, a skutla, which we're told is a Greek word meaning bone of a finger, on my forehead, and said to me, Elazar, my son, my arrows I cast upon you, my arrows. This touch caused the ray of light to shine from his forehead. So what I was curious about is, again, this makes sense, the Steinsaltz comment, because the ray of light, because we were told that this ray of light was coming from his forehead, which sounds like a very positive thing. And so this must have been a playful snapping of his fingers. And this whole notion of my arrows upon you, the notes tell us here, but where's the positive? It could be, the response could be an expression of joy and amusement, like an adult's reaction when a child answers a question with a sharp wit. But the other possibility is he wasn't so happy with them. My arrows upon you mean I want to like shoot you, because you're being very chutzpahdik, you know, asking, I offered you 13 rivers of pure balsam oil and now you want more, and you're telling me, you know, give it to everybody. So it's not really clear how the story ends, but it's, oh, I see you guys are back. Okay. So I was just saying that the, it's not so clear the end of this story is if it's a positive or not. You know, this whole thing of snapping God's finger on his forehead and saying, my arrows are upon you. It could be read as a positive, like, oh, you clever lad, you clever Rabbi Elazar, you know, wanting more, you're so chutzpahdik and you want more for everybody. Everybody should have 13 rivers of pure balsam oil. Or it could be that God's really irritated with them. It's not so clear how the story ends. Okay, here we go back to fasting for rain. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Gazar Tanita. Oh, this is great. This is fascinating because one story after another of failures of rabbis to bring rain. Now, remember, this whole tractate, the whole chapter is about what we do when there is no rain. And there are prayers to be said, and there are fasts to be declared. And that's the rictual to get God to be compassionate and bring rain. And yet here we have story after story of rabbis who did what they're, the ritual, but it didn't work. So what does that tell us? I think that's so fascinating. Okay, well, here's the first one. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina decreed a fast, but the rain did not come. They said to him, didn't Rabbi Hoshua ben Levi decree a fast and rain came? It must have made him feel really good. He said to him, but you're talking to Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, and you're comparing me to Rabbi Hoshua ben Levi. We're two different people of unequal stature. They said to him, let us come and focus our minds. Perhaps the hearts of the members of a community will break and rain will come. So they prayed for mercy, but still the rain didn't come. So now everybody working together, it doesn't come. So Amar lahu, nicha lechu sheyavo matar bishvileni. Are you content that rain should come on our account and through our merit? And they said to him, Hain, yes. And he said then, skies, skies, rakia, rakia, kasi panecha, lo ikase. Skies, skies, cover your face with clouds. But the sky was not covered with clouds. So nothing is working. And so what did he say? Amar, kama azin panei rakia. How impudent is the face of the sky to ignore me. And at that point, ikase va'ata mitra. So here in this story, it's kind of like Rabbi Chama bar Chanina is saying, look, all of us are praying. All of us are doing what we're supposed to be doing. And you skies, you're not responding properly. How dare you? And it's almost like he shames the sky to bring rain. Very interesting. But notice that he doesn't do it about himself. It's not about me, it's about all of us. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, here we go. Another story. Levi gezar tanita. Levi decreed a fast, and rain did not come. Velo atamitra. He said before God, Master of the universe, Ribono Shalom, Alita v'yashavta b'marom, you live up there in the heavens. Ve'ena tam merachem al banecha, and you are not caring about your children. You're not being merciful to your children. Atamitra, the rain came. Ve'itla, but what's it as a but he became lame. Ve'itla, he was so. Now Steinsaltz is telling us that this is a punishment for the way he spoke to God. Nevertheless, the rain did come. I think it's kind of interesting. So here we have a kind of a story of, and we have so many later tales in where, especially there's a Hasidic Levi of Berichev, where a lot of times he would call out to God and say, come on, God, you're not being kind enough to your children who are struggling. And, the heavens would answer him. Here too, so it's the same kind of story. Oh, come on, God, you are not being merciful enough. And the rain comes. But according to it, that's the reason why Levi was lame. And Rav Elazar learns a lesson from this. Le'olam al yatiach adam dvarim klapei mala. You should never speak against the heavens. Never cast aspersions against the heavens. Shaharei adam gadol hitiach dvarim klapei mala. Because a great person like Levi did this, ve'itlan, he became lame. Who was this person? This was Levi. But then we have a different ending to the story. Hagarmalei, is that why Levi became lame? Veha Levi achave kida kamei de Rabbi ve'itla. It stated that Levi demonstrated kida, which is, I guess, a particular kind of bowing on one's face before the high priest, and it's performed by the high priest, and it was he did this before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And because, however, I don't know, he didn't do it properly, and I guess in Megillah 22b, we have the story, because he didn't do it the right way, he became lame as a result of that. So the Gemara says, ha veha garmalei. So it was both those things. He was trying to demonstrate this form of bowing before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and that caused him to become lame. And he also suffered an injury because he spoke improperly before God. To me, I just wonder if this was a kind of a contrarian view to the story number one. That is, story number one, or an explanation number one of Levi, is that he was angry because God wasn't being merciful enough, and he kind of had to shame God into bringing rain. And then he became lame, and the lameness had nothing to do with his critique. One story sees that as a consequence of Levi's chutzpah personality. The second story says, no, it's kind of a natural thing, as almost to say he wasn't hurt, because he wasn't punished because of his speaking out against God. Again, this is a story of speaking truth to power. God, where is your mercifulness? Okay, well, here we have another story. Rabbi Chia bar Luliani shma'inhu lahanach anane de ka'amri netu v'nitvi maya be'amonu Moab. Rabbi Chia bar Luliani, who obviously had very good ears, heard clouds speaking to one another. And they said, we're going to go and rain on Ammon and Moab, which is that's basically modern Jordan. It's on the other side of the Jordan River. And partly, I think, Syria also maybe, or that area, but that area of the Middle East, we're going to go rain on them. And so Rabbi Chia gets upset. He says before God, Master of the universe, when you gave your Torah to your nation Israel, Chazarta al kol umot ha'olam velo kiblua. This is that famous midrash, or it's based on the famous midrash, that God brings the 10 commandments to the entire world, and he goes to, or to the Torah, and he goes to every nation, and he says, I've got this Torah. Do you want it? And they're like, well, what's in it? And you got no stealing. Well, we make our living by stealing. No murder. Oh, that's how we take care of our enemies. No adultery. Well, that's what people do around here. So they don't accept it. And who are the only people accept it are the Jewish people, the people of Israel. They accept it. So using based on this midrash, he says, when you gave your Torah to the nation Israel, you approached all the nations of the world, and none of them would accept it. Wait a minute, now you're giving them rain? Why don't you give us rain? We're the ones who accepted your Torah. And miraculously, the clouds threw the rain in their place in Eretz Yisrael. Okay. So now we have another story about Rabbi Chia bar Luliani. Rabbi Chia bar Luliani taught. What's the meaning of this verse? Tzadik katamar ifrach ke'erez bavanon yiskeh, right? This is from the Psalm for Shabbat. It says, the righteous shall flourish like the palm tree, he shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. So obviously, this is what we call parallelism in biblical poetry. It says the same thing twice in slightly different ways. But Rabbi Chia bar Luliani is taking this very literally. Wait a minute, if it's stated palm tree, why do you need cedar? And if you got cedar, what do you learn from it being palm tree? Two different things. What's the double comparison? What can we learn from this? Well, he explains, where it stated palm tree, but it didn't have the verse, the section of the verse about cedar, I would say that just as in the case of the palm tree, ein gizo machalif, af tzadik chas v'shalom, ein gizo machalif. A palm tree, I guess if you cut down a palm tree, it will not replenish them when the stump. So heaven forbid, in the regard to a righteous person, his shoots will not replenish. He won't be, when he's brought down, he won't be able to. We would assume, the message is that if he's ever brought down, or maybe after he exists, he won't have, his children will not be righteous, right? It's just the righteous person himself exists, or he won't be able to recover. Therefore, you've got the verse about cedar, because a cedar does grow new shoots after its stump is cut down. So therefore, it teaches us that the righteous individual will thrive again, or that his righteous person will have righteous children. Conversely, if we only had the part about the cedar and not the palm tree, I would say that just as in the case of a cedar doesn't produce any fruit. So a righteous person, God forbid, would not produce fruit, which again could be either reward in the world to come, or maybe children who are righteous. Therefore, you need both. You need both parts of the verse. You need the palm tree to teach us that there's fruit. The righteous person produces fruit, reward in the world to come. And we also need cedar, because a cedar replenishes itself just like the righteous person will. So now we have this question, wait a minute. Do cedar shoots really replenish themselves? Is that really true? Ve'erez gizo machalif. Because we have this teaching in a Baraita, halokech ilan mechavero lakutz, magbiho min hakarka tefach v'kotseitz. One who bought a tree, acquired a tree from another to chop it down for wood, but he doesn't own the whole tree, right? He only acquired the rights to chop down the tree for the wood. He must lift his axe axe a handbreadth and chop there. He can't cut it down to its very roots. You've got to cut it down from it a little bit higher so the tree will grow back. However, in a case where he purchased a large sycamore, Bivtulat hashikma, the sycamore tree, shlosha tvachim. You got to leave it 3 handbreadths. In the case of an untrimmed sycamore tree, oh, we did that one. In a situation where one bought reeds or grapevines, he may chop only from the first knot and above. In the case of palms or cedars, bidikalim uva'arazim, chofer lamata umisharesh. One may dig down and uproot it, as shoots will not replenish themselves. Lefisha ein gizo machalif. So in that case, see, you don't have to worry. If you bought, according to this teaching, if you bought a cedar tree, you can basically, and you just bought the tree for wood, you can basically uproot the entire tree because it's not growing back. It will not replenish. So this is a contradiction. Cedars, a minute ago, it said a cedar replenishes itself. So what are we talking about? Other types of cedar trees. Rabba Barhuna, de Amar Rabba Barhuna, Asara mine arazim. There's at least 10 types of cedar trees. And we have a verse here, Etain bamidbar erez shita vehadas. I guess these are all different types of cedar trees. The cedar, the acacia, the myrtle, the oil tree. I will set in the desert, cypress, the plane tree, and the larch together. The 7 species mentioned in this verse are all called cedars. So there's different types of cedars. So some cedars do replenish, some cedars don't. But now what's so interesting here is that earlier in our story, we had the comparison between cedar trees and reeds, that one should always be like a reed because the reed pops back up when it's pushed over, and the cedar doesn't replenish. Yet here, I guess the conclusion of the story explains that there are different types of cedars. Some cedars will replenish themselves, but some, if they get knocked over, they never come back. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan, Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer shegazar 13 taniyot al tzibur velo yardu geshamim. Rabbi Eliezer, the great Rabbi Eliezer, who decreed us, he was, again, there was a fast. He decreed 13 fasts, a whole series of fasts upon the congregation, and rain didn't come. At the end of the last fast, now remember, Rabbi Eliezer is the guy who has this really tough, stern personality. He's the one who, this famous story of the fight with the rabbis, Rabbi Eliezer is correct, but it's the story of Lo b'shamayim hi. The majority of rabbis vote against them on the Tanur Shel Achnai. I think we had that story in this. Do we have that? No, that wasn't in this Talmud. The Tanur Shel Achnai, he says, I'm right. The majority rules against them. Eventually, they attack him and kick him out of the academy. They put him into cherem because he was such a harsh personality. So here we can see that personality in acting up. So he declares 13 fasts, no rain comes, obviously not working. At the end of the last fast, people are like, okay, it's time to go. Nothing's happening. And he gets on their case and he says, Tikantem kvarim la'atzmechem? Have you, you're also confident that it's not working, that it'll never work, and rain isn't going to come, and you're all going to die? Are you all, we're not going to try anymore because you're just going to give up and prepare your the grave sites? Ge'u kol ha'am bivchiyah. it pushed them. They felt so, he intimidated them and he pushed them. They started crying. They realized, oh my goodness, we're going to die. With that crying, then the rain came. I guess as a sign of their humility. So what pushed them? What motivated the rain to come? Was it him intimidating them and them crying about their fate? Or was it their humility? They realized that, they needed to participate and humble themselves as well. It's not clear, but it's more interesting that he pushed them into crying and feeling bad, maybe like embarrassing them into their shame, and then the rains come. Here's another story. Shuv Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer shiarad lifnei teva ve'amar esrim ve'arba brachot. This time he says, he prays the 24 blessings that we've been told you're supposed to pray, and nothing happened. Yarad Rabbi Akiva acharav. Rabbi Akiva then came before the ark and prayed. And what did he say? This is the famous prayer that we say, on Rosh Hashanah. Avinu Malkeinu, ein lanu melech ela ata. Avinu Malkeinu, lemancha rachem aleinu, v'yardu geshamim. He says the prayer that we developed known as the Avinu Malkeinu. This is where it comes from. And the rain comes down. Now, Havu Marananim Rabbanan, the rabbis start murmuring amongst themselves. Now, it's not clear what they're murmuring. According to Steinsaltz, and I think he's right about this, what they're murmuring is that Rabbi Akiva was greater than Rabbi Eliezer because the rain came when he prayed. But, lest you think that, Yatzta bat kol ve'amra, Lo mipnei shezeh gadol mizeh. It's not that one of these rabbis was greater than others. Simply, it's shezeh ma'avir amidotav v'zeh eino ma'avir amidotav. Ma'avir amidotav is a very interesting phrase. I thought we have a note here. This is one of God's midot. God repays a person for measure. This is interesting. So this is their explanation. Just as a person does not seek revenge from those who treated him wrongly, God forgives him for wrongs he himself has committed. So that's Ma'avir al Midotav. But what they're missing here is that one of the 13 midot of God is that God is Ma'avir al Midotav. God is compassionate. God doesn't take things personally. And neither did Rabbi Akiva. He was very modest. And Rabbi Eliezer, as we've seen, has a very harsh personality. And he does take things, just from the previous story, right? He gets angry when the people start to walk out on him. And that's that's the reason why God responded to Rabbi Akiva and not Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Akiva is a more forgiving individual. I love that story. I think it's very, very powerful in terms of comparing rabbis and their personalities. Okay, we have a new section here. We're Tanu Rabbanan. We have a Baraita. Ad matai yehu geshamim yordim ve'atzibur poskim betanitam. So let's say the rain comes. Right, we've been praying for rain and the rain starts to come. When does the community cease their fast for rain? So if it kimilo berach hamach resha, the measure of a full depth of the plow, where it bends. So then they can cease fasting. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion, Divrei Rabbi Meir. So there's enough rain so that it seeps into the earth. Havachamim orim b'chareva. So the Chachamim had a different measurement. They said if the earth is completely b'chareva, in very dry earth, tefach, the amount, a handbreadth of moisture, b'veinonit tifachayim, 2 tefachs in average soil, and be'avuda, worked soil, plowed soil, 3 tefachim, 3 handbreadths. So different measuring. It depends on what the soil's like. You can't expect the amount of rain to soak in a very dry, parched field the same amount as you could in a worked over field. So we have different, but you have this measurement. There's a certain amount of rain that comes, and then you can stop fasting. Tanya, Baraita. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer, Ein lecha tefach milmala she'ein tahom yotzei likrato 3 tefachim. There is no handbreadth of rain from above toward which the water of the deep does not rise 3 handbreadths. Now, I wasn't really sure what this is talking about. It seems to be saying when rain comes from above, rain below, maybe it's this image of the creation story where you have rain above and rain below, and the goal of the rains, the waters, are to connect with each other. And so maybe that's what he's talking about. So when rain comes from above up to a handbreadth, the waters in the earth, the deep, they rise up a little bit. Now, then we have an objection. Okay, wait a minute. Vehatanya tifachaim. Okay, 2 handbreadths. You said 3 handbreadths. We have a baraita that says the water rises 2 handbreadths. And the answer again is this isn't lokashia, kan be'avuda, kan be'shein avuda. Okay, so in land that has been worked, when it seeps down, it's going to be 3 handbreadths. The water is going to seep lower, and I guess the water comes up. Wait, let's see if I got this correct. It's referring to worked land, which water penetrates faster. Whereas there, so that's the 3 handbreadths. There in the second bright is referring to unworked land, which does not penetrate as easily, and therefore the water of the deep only rises 2 handbreadths. Okay, because it's unworked, so it doesn't have a little tougher to get up. Okay, interesting. And then continuing on this whole idea, Amar Rabbi Elazar, kisheminas et hamayim b'chag, when the water festival of Sukkot, they pour water as an offering. Tahom omer l'chavero, we have waters of the deep. The waters of the deep say to the waters of the deep, let your waters flow as I hear the voices of 2 of our friends, the wine libation and the water libation, which are poured on the altar. As it's stated, deep calls to deep at the sound of your channels. All your waves and your billows are gone over me. The upper waters of the deep call to the lower waters of the deep when they hear the sound of the libation. So here too, I think what's going on when it says the tahom l'tahom, the waters above, right? We have this image from the creation story that there are waters that exist above the heavens. When God split the waters of the creation story, there are the waters above that exist, and then there's waters below the earth, right? There's water in the middle. And when on the Sukkot festival, when the water libation is poured along with the wine libation, it somehow motivates the 2 waters of the deep, the heavenly deep and the earthly deep, to try to draw closer to each other. I don't know if that's a meaning of the end of the creation, like the creation started, they're trying to get back to chaos, or if they want to participate in this celebration. It's a very strange comment, but it is something about the water on Sukkot causes these heavenly and earthly deep waters to want to connect with each other or come forward. Here we have again a story. Amar Rabba ledidi chazi li hai oridya demei leigla ufirsa Favate. Okay. I have seen this angel in charge of water, Ridya. That's the angel in charge of water's name. It and has even this is very interesting stuff. It's even has a shape of a calf whose lips were parted. And Ridya is standing between the lower waters of the deep and the upper waters of the deep. To the upper waters of the deep, he said, distill your water, let it rain. To the lower waters of the deep, he said, let your water flow from below. As it is stated, the flowers appear upon the earth, the time of singing is come, the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. So again, this angel brings the waters together. Now, maybe this is referring to not only rain, but like our drinking water from in South Bend, and the drinking water in Chicago comes from reservoirs of water deep in the ground. We don't get our water from Lake Michigan. There's these reservoirs deep into the earth that we pump up. So maybe that's what they're talking about, that they know that there is water deep in the earth that people drink from, and then you've got the rainwater that people drink from, and this angel brings them together and allows us to drink. I'm not sure, really. Okay. Where do we have to go here? Oh, all right. Here, let's go through this a little quickly. All right, so we go. The Mishnah, here's the last part of the Mishnah. Hayu mitanim v'yarudu geshamim kodem hanetzach chama. Oh, so this is, all right, so you've been fasting, and while you're fasting because there hasn't been any rain falls before the sun comes up, hanetzach chama. What do? Do you stop fasting? Because you haven't really even started the fast. Tanu Rabbanan, hayu mitanim v'yarudu lahem geshamim kodem hanetzach chama lo yashlimu. If you start fasting right at the very beginning of daylight, and then it starts to rain, cancel the fast. La'achara netzach chama, so that's a little bit later when the sun is kind of up, it's just starting to come up in the sky, you still have to complete the fast. That's Rabbi Meir's view. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kodem chatzot lo yashlimu. So he gives it, it's a little easier. If it starts raining before the middle of the day, 12 noon, and a perfect day of 12 hours of sunlight, if it comes up before 12, if it starts raining before 12 noon, you don't have to finish your fast. But if it comes up at 3 in the afternoon, if it starts raining by 3 in the afternoon, you still have to fast till the end of the day. Rabbi Yossi Omer, kodem tesha shaot. He's even better. He says if it starts raining before the 9th hour of daylight, you don't have to continue your fast. But after the 9th hour, so like, maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, then you do have to continue. Shekin matzinu be'achav melech Yisrael, shehitana b'tesha sha'ot ulamala. Shene'amar harita ki nichna Achav. So there's a story about Achav, the king of Israel, who fasted from the 9th hour of the day onward. Here's the verse in Kings, and Achav was a bad guy. He lived at the time of Elijah. And it came to pass when Achav heard these words that he rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his flesh and fasted and lay in sackcloth and went softly. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite saying, do you see how Achav humbles himself before me? So according to tradition, this occurred in the 9th hour. And Achav continued to fast because there was no rain. He continued to fast. Even as a bad guy, at least in that case, God was pleased with his humiliation. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, this is a grandson, I think, of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, decreed a fast. And rain fell for them after sunrise. Savar le'ashluminhu. He thought he should continue the fast. Amar le Rabbi Ami, kodem chatzot ve'achar chatzot shaninu. We were according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, about middle of the day. That's when as long as the rain came before the middle of the day, we can stop our fast. Shmuel HaKatan gezar ta'anita. Okay, Shmuel HaKatan, very modest individual. We know from stories about him, he's a very modest guy, peace-loving person. He decreed a fast. V'yaradu lahem geshamim kodem hanetzach chama. And the rain came before Neitachama. Ksvurin ha'am lomar shivcho shel tzibur. The people said, "Oh, it's because we're so good. We merited rainfall even before we got to the full fast." Amar lahem, he said, "Oh, emshol lachem mashal. I'll give you an analogy. Lama davar doma. What's it like? La'eved shemavakesh pras mirabo. A servant requested a reward from his master. Amar lahem, tenulo ve'al eshma kolo. He said to them, give him what he asked for, but I don't want to listen to him. I don't want to hear his prayers. See, that's what it is. It's not a good thing. You just said it's because we're very worthy. And he says, no, basically it's like God said, okay, you can have the rain. I just don't want to listen to you people. I'm not really happy with you. So don't think it's so about yourself. Another occasion, Shuv Shmuel HaKatan Gezaratanita. Okay, he declared a fast. And this time it rained after the sun went down. So they had to pray the whole day, but it came right at the end. They said, oh, look how good we were. We fasted, the day ended, and boom, the rain came. We're so good. Amar lahem Shmuel. So he said, okay, lo shevach shel tziburhu. That is not praiseworthy on your account. Ela amshol lechem mashal. I'll give you an analogy. Lama hadavar domeh. What's it like? Le'eved shemivakesh pras mirabo. This servant comes and he requests a reward from his master. Ve'amar lahem, and the master says, himtinu lo ad sheyitmak make v'yitzta'er. I'll give it to you, but I want you to suffer first. And at the end of the day of suffering, so don't think it's about you. It wasn't your credit. It's that God wanted to make you squirm a little bit before God gave you your reward. What is considered? When can the tzibur, the community, feel justified in saying it's something we did? And the explanation is Mashiv. Amar Mashiv Aruach Unashav Zika. When the prayer leader says, praises God as the one who brings wind, and the wind starts to blow. And then the prayer leader says, Borida Geshem, the one who praises God for bringing rain, and at that moment the rain comes. Oh, so it's got to be in the moment. Maaseh v'gazru ta'anit belot. There was an incident in which this happened. V'nema halel me'ikara. So an incident occurred in which the court decreed a fast and load. And when rain fell, they ate and drank, and afterwards they recited Hallel. The Gemara asks, should we recite Hallel right away? Abai v'Rava da Amri Tavrahu lefisha enomrim Hallel ela al nefesh seve'a v'cheres meleah. You should say Hallel when you are satisfied, when you feel, if you've been fasting all day, and the rain comes, you're going to be very hungry. You're not going to really able to celebrate Hallel, to sing it out with the fullness of yourself, because you're starving. So therefore, you should actually eat first. Go on a full stomach, satisfy your soul with food and drink, and then recite Hallel, because you'll be in the proper frame of mind. But then they got a question. Wait a minute, is that so, Ini? Rav Papa ikla leve kanista de Avigovar. So Rav Papa came to the Knesset, the Beit Knesset of Avigovar, this place called Avigovar, which I guess is in Mechoza. This is Babylonia. And he decreed a fast. And then the rain came. The rain came before Chatzot. The rain came in the early part of the day. And they immediately said Hallel. So they've been fasting, and then they said Hallel, and then they went home and they ate and drank. So wait a minute, you just told us you should be satisfied, you should be satiated and comfortable, proper frame of mind, and then you say Hallel. Here in Mechoza, Rav Papa said, let's say Hallel right away, go home and then eat. So there was a very important reason. Because basically the people of Mechoza were shikers. They were drunks, I guess, or had problems with their liquor. The shchichi bahu shichrut. Because the drunkenness was common among them. So we don't trust the people of Mechoza to not get drunk and make fools of themselves and come back and pray. All right. Hadranolach Seder Ta'aniyot Elu. We have completed this chapter, and we hope to complete it many times more in the future. But for next week, we will begin the last chapter of Tractate Ta'anit. All right. Hopefully you guys will be able to watch this on the video. Mazel tov.